He didn't buy a word she said. None of them did. So when Riley Vance stared that Marine straight in the eye and coolly dropped two simple words, "last chance," they burst out laughing. They didn't know who she actually was, had no clue what she'd done, and definitely didn't realize the quiet woman they boxed in at Oro 200 hours in Iron Ridge happened to be a Navy SEAL combat specialist on mandated rest. They rushed her anyway. 10 seconds later, not one of them was upright. And before we show you what happens when you brush off a SEAL's warning, drop a comment telling us where you're watching from, hit like, subscribe, and tap the bell. Because the next time you hear someone say, "last chance," you better pray it isn't coming from her. The gravel lot behind the Joint Tactical Integration Facility stayed still that morning, broken only by the dull thud of ruck weights hitting the ground and the occasional bark from a cadre correcting sloppy form. It wasn't exactly a base. No Army, Marine Corps, or federal badge claimed it, but a shared regional training hub where different branches and agencies blended their combat readiness programs. Which meant the usual hierarchy didn't matter here, and when rank gets blurry, ego fills the space fast. Riley stepped out of the admin trailer without any fuss. No weapon, no clipboard, no name tag. Just black boots, tan cargo pants, a plain gray tee, and mirrored shades hiding most of her face. She was compact, around 5'5", lean muscle, all efficient movement and zero wasted effort. The kind of build nobody noticed until it moved, and then it was impossible to ignore. Most people never caught the tiny tattoo on her inner wrist. A simple ink dark mark shaped somewhere between a blade and a serpent. She crossed the training pad without a word and knelt beside a half-stripped grappling dummy, tightening the chest straps while a few trainees watched her from a distance. She didn't bother introducing herself. They handled that for her. "Hey," someone called out, loud enough for everyone but aimed straight at her. "You dropping off the coffee? Get lost, sweetheart?" The voice came from Kincaid, contractor, mid-30s, ex-infantry, now making good money training tactical teams overseas. Broad, loud, sun-baked from years in hot zones, and extremely allergic to being ignored. Standing beside him, Marlowe and Daxon snickered, both young, cocky, buzzing with pre-workout and bravado. One muttered, "Guess yoga stretch class is in the wrong building." Riley didn't react. She rose, checked the dummy's spine, and finally turned toward them, posture relaxed but aligned, like she was gauging wind direction, not confrontation. "Gonna need you to speak up," Kincaid grinned. "We don't do sign language here." She tilted her head slightly before answering, voice even. "I'm not here to fight anyone. Walk away now." The air seemed to tighten. A few trainees paused mid-rep. Daxon blinked. Marlowe smirked. Kincaid cracked his knuckles like he was prepping for a warm-up set, not stepping toward a warning line. "That supposed to be a threat or a meltdown?" he scoffed, shifting forward just enough to test her. Riley didn't repeat herself. She didn't grin. She just watched him with the calm of someone who already knew which choice he'd made. Behind her, an instructor stepped out of the admin office and halted, observing but staying out of it, for the moment. Kincaid let out a loud, self-certain laugh. Marlowe echoed it. Daxon nudged the guy next to him like the whole thing was a comedy routine. Riley didn't flinch. Riley didn't react. She simply turned back to the grappling dummy and tightened the last strap as if she'd never spoken a warning at all. But every one of them heard it, and hours later, when medics were dragging bodies off the deck and someone was yelling about a shattered elbow, that single line echoed like a prophecy. "I'm not here to fight anyone. Walk away now." They chose not to. Up on the observation deck, boots thudded and instructors shouted over the metallic echo of the railings. But inside the combat arena, everything felt strangely still. Riley Vance stood exactly where they'd positioned her, on the right side of the sand-brushed training pit, just a couple meters from the blue tarp marking her team's gear zone. She hadn't touched her helmet, hadn't even glanced at the padded batons arranged behind her like museum pieces. She just waited, hands relaxed at her sides, eyes steady, like she was letting a storm pass overhead. Across from her, 3 Marines circled with puffed chests and lifted chins, one of them smacking his practice baton against his palm like he was begging for an excuse to use it. The whistle hadn't even blown, but that didn't stop them. "This one's a reserve, Phil," one sneered, running his gaze over Riley as if she wasn't even cleared for full contact. "Don't worry, I'll take it easy," another joked. The third didn't speak. He just rolled his neck until it cracked like a warning shot. Up in the booth, one instructor leaned toward another and muttered, not quietly, "Why's she just standing there?" The reply came with a smug undertone. "Ex-Army, intel type, desk jockey. Probably thinks this is just reflex drills." The first instructor chuckled. "She's not gonna fight." Down in the pit, one Marine finally stepped forward a little too boldly, his boot crunching into the sand right in front of hers. Not touching, just close enough to claim space. Riley didn't blink. He leaned in, smirking. "Don't worry, sweetheart. I won't tell anyone if you quit before the whistle." Still nothing. No shift in her breathing, no hint of tension, just one tiny movement so subtle the others missed it. She glanced at his boot, then the space between them, then his throat. Such a small shift, but to the Marine in front of her, it felt surgical, like she'd just assessed him down to bone and impulse. Without meaning to, he stepped back. His friend frowned. "Yo, what are you doing?" "Nothing," the Marine muttered, though even he didn't sound convinced. The staff instructor finally lifted the whistle to his mouth. Riley's team still hadn't geared up, and the comments from the booth kept rolling. "This'll be over fast. I almost feel bad. She's not gonna fight." The whistle shrilled. Riley didn't move, but the Marines did, all 3 charging at once. The first dove low, fast, aiming for her legs like he was chasing a trophy instead of running a drill. He expected her to panic or scramble, or at least brace. He was already grinning as he dropped his center of gravity. But Riley had shifted before anyone noticed. The booth cameras weren't even focused on her feet, so no one saw her right foot angled just enough to slide his momentum off track. Then she dropped. Not back, but directly into his force. She didn't block the takedown, she let it turn itself inside out. Her right arm threaded under his extended elbow, not striking, just guiding, while her left shoulder dipped, redistributing weight with surgical timing. His own movement betrayed him, collapsing his balance. And then he was airborne. Not because she muscled him up, but because she let his momentum finish the job. His back hit the mat with a deep, stunned grunt. Riley didn't spare the first Marine a glance because the second was already mid-swing. His padded baton sliced past her head, not because she reacted late, but because she'd stepped inside his arc before it ever completed. It brushed only a strand of her hair. Her hands stayed empty. She had never picked up a weapon. Instead, her forearms locked under his grip, elbows tucked tight like a human lever. She didn't need gear, she simply turned his own against him. One sharp rotation, her shoulders snapping around like a hinge, and the baton rattled to the floor. He tried to yank free. She didn't allow it. Her knee shot upward, burying itself in his gut, folding him on instinct, then stopping him cold when he felt her elbow poised under his chin, one nudge away from crushing his airway. But she didn't finish him. She let go, letting him drop to one knee, gasping, bewildered like his entire training had suddenly misfired. Up in the booth, one instructor lurched forward. "Wait, what did she just rewind that?" The third Marine, quiet until then, charged from behind, hoping a blindside grab would level the odds. Riley wasn't facing him. She didn't turn, didn't brace, didn't even pivot. She simply ducked, and the instant his arm crossed over her shoulder, she locked it in place, not with a dramatic twist or brute strength, but with the exact angle taught only in the highest-tier restraint programs, the kind never put on public record, the kind used in black site transfers and detainee extractions. She moved like someone who had trained not to win, but to neutralize. His face slammed into the mat so hard his legs kicked after impact. He didn't get back up. The whole arena froze. No bell, no whistle, it was simply over. Riley stepped back, breathing even, and walked toward the edge of the pit. She still hadn't touched a baton. She still hadn't spoken a word. The drill was supposed to be routine, not even part of the official review, but instructors had their habits, especially with recruits quietly flagged by the higher-ups, so someone always ran a backup recording. Which is why, by 1730, the footage had already made its way through half the compound, and by 18 it was playing on every phone in the mess hall. At first glance, it didn't even look dramatic. Riley wasn't flashy. No haymakers, no bravado, no victory poses, just precise, silent dismantling. And that silence made every movement louder. She didn't even adjust her stance, one instructor muttered, pausing the frame. She baited him. Another zoomed in on her redirection of the first dive. That's not academy training. That's foreign theater level. Who taught her that lock? Then someone broke down the third takedown frame by frame, the restraint, the angle, the pivot, and curiosity shifted into something colder. "Where's she from again?" a senior evaluator asked. Another pulled up Riley's digital file. Signals intelligence contractor, attached to a cross-branch task force, deployment history classified under OGA markers, other government agency, the label that meant don't ask. That was when Lieutenant Colonel Harland, the officer who had quietly approved her placement, heard a knock. Two instructors and a training chief stood before him, silent, holding a tablet. They didn't need to explain. Harland watched the footage once again, then a third time before setting it down. Was this sanctioned? No, sir, not officially. He exhaled. Who put her in that ring? Sergeant Reddick, sir, said she lacked aggression in drills. Harland didn't raise his voice. He simply closed the door and delivered one sentence that later appeared in the disciplinary notes. You'd better pray she doesn't file a report. But Riley never did. She didn't ask for apologies, didn't escalate anything, didn't even acknowledge the debrief request. She returned to her bunk, wrote her nightly logs, and stayed quiet. Quiet enough that it made everyone more uneasy because no one could tell what she knew or what she was holding back. The tape was flagged do not share, but it didn't matter. By week's end, it had spread farther than any sanctioned training clip in a decade. It wasn't the fight that unsettled people. It was the way she walked away as if nothing had happened. Her silence didn't settle the tension, it stirred it. Riley didn't brag, didn't sulk, didn't correct rumors. She showed up to every morning drill like the incident had never occurred. She didn't defend herself. She didn't need to. Riley just ran, lifted, filed whatever data she was told to, and during tactical analysis she gave answers that were crisp, minimal, and straight from the manual. No opinion, no embellishing. For a group fueled by bravado, her silence felt more insulting than outright arrogance. So they made a choice. If she wouldn't talk, they'd push until she cracked. It began with a manufactured miscommunication. She was marked absent from a session she'd attended on time, followed by a public write-up and a conveniently botched gear drop. Her boots were swapped for a pair half a size too small, her pack loaded with 10 pounds of wet sand. She didn't protest, didn't file a correction, so they escalated. Instructors pulled her aside for a fake after-action review, calling her the weak link in a hostage simulation. "I don't understand why you're here, Vance," a sergeant said. "This isn't intel anymore. This is close quarters, real stakes." Riley stood at attention, eyes forward. "Understood, Sergeant." "No, it's not about understanding. It's about belonging. Do you honestly think you belong here?" She stayed silent, and that silence irritated them even more. Then came the public push. Day 19. Open drill. Rain turning the dirt to mud, thick heat pressing down over the compound. They shoved a 30-pound steel sledge into her hands and pointed to a stack of tires. 300 strikes, an instructor barked. Riley didn't ask why, didn't question the number. She just lifted the hammer and began, no gloves, no brakes. By strike 80, her palms burned red. By 140, they blistered. By 200, they'd torn open and bled. Someone quietly radioed in, asking if they should cut the drill short, but the lead instructor only shrugged. "She'll break or she won't." She didn't. Strike 300 landed just as the sun split through the storm clouds, the light catching the sweat streaking her face like paint. She set the hammer down, walked to the line and waited, silent, steady, no eye contact, just her posture. That was what rattled them. Not the endurance, not the strength, but the fact she wasn't doing any of it to prove a thing. She was simply doing it, and that terrified them, because if this was her quiet, what would she be like if she ever decided to speak? Then came the review. It wasn't on the schedule, wasn't routine, and it definitely wasn't friendly. Commander Blake Rourke, cross-branch advisor, former SEAL Team 6, the man who designed half the assessment standards, arrived without warning. His chopper touched down late in the evening with no ceremony, just boots hitting gravel and eyes scanning the compound like he already knew the weak spots. Rourke wasn't some desk officer. He'd fought 2 wars, run black ops across 4 administrations, and wrote the playbook these instructors swore by. When he stepped into the debrief tent with 2 civilian observers, the entire tone shifted. Backs straightened. Students quieted. "Vance," he said, not bothering with introductions as his gaze locked onto her. "Step forward." She moved without hesitation, posture immaculate. "You're the only non-combat branch applicant here. Everyone else either served in direct action or trained for it." "Yes, sir." "You know what people say about Intel trying to go kinetic?" "Yes, sir." "What do they say?" "That we don't understand the terrain, that we analyze from distance instead of living it up close. Are they right?" Riley didn't blink. "No, sir." One of the civilian observers scribbled something. Rourke turned toward the instructors. "I've reviewed the footage of her sledgehammer drill. I've reviewed the sabotaged gear load. I've reviewed the falsified absence report." A soft intake of breath from one instructor. Too late to hide. "This isn't just procedural failure," Rourke said. "It's cowardice. You couldn't break her with fatigue, so you tried to break her with paperwork." No one spoke. Riley didn't move. Then Rourke did something none of them expected. He stepped forward, paused, and offered his hand. She shook it, firm grip, no emotion. "This woman," he announced to the room, "has taken more psychological fire in 20 days than some of you have in 2 deployments, and she's still calm, still laser-focused." Silence tightened the air. "She's not weak, she's mission-calibrated, and she's staying, and I suggest every instructor here reread her file, with both eyes open this time." The civilians followed him out. Riley didn't say a word. She simply returned to formation. But from that moment forward, no one looked at her the same. It was supposed to pass as a corrective group drill. That's how they framed it anyway. Officially, it was a night op meant to test reaction speed, small unit cohesion, and close quarters movement. Unofficially, it was a setup. They waited until all instructors went dark, until officers disappeared into their quarters, until only moonlight and muscle memory kept the compound alive. 8 of them, all the guys who had mocked her, doubted her, sabotaged her, closed in under Corporal Strickland, the same one who'd kicked dirt at her boots during the blindfold drill. They caught her just past the motor pool, alone, quiet, returning from the gear room. No cameras, no instructors, no oversight. Perfect. Even an analyst, Strickland said, stepping into her path. Riley didn't flinch. "You've fooled a lot of people," he added, "but not us." The others spread out behind him, forming a tight half-circle. "You know what happens when a weak link thinks it belongs in the chain," one muttered. "It snaps under pressure." Another cracked his knuckles and stepped closer. "You're not going to file a report, right? Not going to run back to your little intel tent?" Riley's face stayed unreadable. She didn't step back, didn't call for help, didn't even raise her hands. She just breathed. Then one of them lunged, reaching to shove her off balance. That was his last mistake. Riley wasn't trained for brute strength. She was built for accuracy. Her left foot slid back 6 inches, weight dropping low, and her right hand caught his incoming wrist. She didn't even need her other arm. She simply redirected his momentum, slamming his chest into the side of a transport truck. He didn't get up. Another charged from behind, but she pivoted low, her elbow connecting with ribs at the perfect angle. Crack. Strickland swore and ran at her, fists balled. He never made it. Riley swept his leg, rose with a palm strike so fast the boys at the edge barely saw it. He staggered. She grabbed his collar and whispered, "You call this stress?" before letting him drop. 4 froze where they stood. 3 backed away. Not one dared attack again. No shouting, no threats. Just Riley standing in the center of their wrecked circle, not even breathing hard. She still hadn't spoken. Not until she turned and walked away. Only then did one of them whisper, "What the hell is she?" And someone else answered, quieter, "Maybe the reason this whole program exists." The next morning's lineup was supposed to be a simple after-action check. No confrontation, no digging, just roster and gear. But when Lieutenant Mercer stepped into the debrief hut, he paused. Riley Vance was already at attention, centered, uniform sharp, while the rest stood scattered and bruised. Strickland had one arm in a sling and a welt darkening under his eye. "What happened?" Mercer asked softly. Silence. He looked at Strickland. Nothing. "Vance," he said, "did something happen last night?" Riley didn't smile or shift. "Yes, sir." He waited. "Would you like to explain?" "No, sir." A beat. "You're not filing a report?" She met his eyes. "That won't be necessary." The room almost exhaled, as if everyone had been holding their breath to see whether justice would be demanded, or simply understood. But Riley had already chosen the latter. Mercer stepped forward, meeting the gaze of each bruised trainee before saying, "Dismissed. All except Specialist Vance." They moved out slowly, quieter than usual. When the door shut, Mercer sat down, letting the silence settle. "Why didn't you escalate?" he finally asked. Riley replied evenly, "Because they weren't the threat, sir." He lifted an eyebrow. "They were the test," she continued, "and I passed." Mercer studied her for a long moment, then nodded. "Yes, Specialist, you did." He stood, turned fully toward her, and gave a sharp, respectful salute. Not as a superior to a subordinate, but as one soldier to another. She returned it without a word, calm as ever. By the next morning, without announcement or ceremony, her name appeared on the classified transfer list. Destination undisclosed. Unit redacted. But everyone in that room knew the truth. She wasn't leaving because she'd failed. She was leaving because she'd already outgrown the program. Whatever awaited her required someone stronger than they'd ever been allowed to train. So, what would you have done in their place? Stayed silent like Riley, or made sure every last one of them paid? And if someone like her, quiet, precise, untouchable, stood across from you in training, would you even know what you were dealing with? Drop a comment and tell us your take. Hit like, subscribe, and make sure you ring the bell so you never miss a story. Share this with someone who respects the quiet ones. And while the next videos from Major Tom's Tales are popping up on screen, cue up the next chapter.